really well and looking forward to Navratri, Durga Puja. It's a little while away, but why not be happy? And welcome to Right Rituals. And like I promised, today we're talking about freelancing and other aspects that can sometimes confuse with freelancing, especially in India. I see a lot of terms being used interchangeably, and we're clearing concepts today. So originally this video was going to have income streams being discussed, but that's so lengthy and a completely different topic, so I'm going to discuss that in the next video. So welcome and subscribe and like if you like content about freelancing. You're talking to somebody who's done it for 6 years, and I'm happy to share what I know with you. The first concept that I'm going to be talking about today is a part-time job. Now, I have very often seen part-time jobs and freelance gigs being used interchangeably, and one very logical reason for this is that very often the same platforms, the same websites that advertise part-time jobs also do the same for freelancing. So this can very often confuse the clients as well, because they often term their freelancing jobs as part-time jobs, or they often term their part-time jobs as freelancing jobs. So I wanted to clear the technical concepts around this, because there is a difference, and sometimes the difference can be quite major. So it's always a good idea to clear out the concept with your customer before you step into one of these things. So typically a part-time job is something that you take on for less than an entire day, but you are very often on the company's payroll or that of a contractor's payroll, and you are an official member of the organization. You sometimes are eligible for benefits. You are also bound by the same clauses, anti-competition clauses, which means that you cannot do any work for a competing client. So within that same space. So sometimes these are applicable. Very often these can also mean that you have relatively more freedom in terms of your time as compared to a full-time job. This is not necessarily freelancing. So you can have a part-time job, you can also freelance with other organizations, that's a different thing. But typically a part-time job means that you are part of an organization, but you don't work full-time. Maybe you have flexible hours, maybe you go in from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening, or 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 o'clock in the evening. So typically half of the workday. And now as a freelancer, you often sign a contract that is a non-disclosure agreement, but you are not entitled to any benefits from the organization. Your name is also not on their payroll. So freelancing is something where you have often multiple gigs, multiple projects. It's a project-based payment system. So you tie up with a company or a customer for a certain amount of time, for a certain project, till the completion of a project, or till the completion of multiple projects within a set time. Now, I have discussed payment models in this video, and you can check that out, because that will probably provide you more clarity on the kind of different models freelancers use to get paid. And what I'm talking about right now is that you can have a retainer model where you complete a number of projects within a certain time frame, and you can also have project-based payments where you get complete multiple projects for a customer and then get paid on the basis of that. So, and you're working typically with multiple customers depending on your time, as your time permits, and how much time you have to give to how many customers. And you also have several platforms like Fiverr or Upwork or Freelancer that I spoke about in my last video, so you can go check that one out. So you have multiple customers coming into you. So there are no non-competition clauses with freelancing. There are no benefits associated with freelancing that you get from an organization either, which may be applicable to a part-time worker. And so right now, just for reference, I see a lot of ads. I don't know, maybe it's targeting me, but I see White Hat Junior being a very popular teaching site for coding. You're supposed to teach coding to youngsters, and they offer part-time jobs. Now note that these are not freelancers teaching. They will be associated with White Hat Junior to teach coding. This is not a sponsored video of any sort, so I'm just offering this as an example and hoping that some of you have come across this advertisement which seemed pertinent to this topic. So I'm just letting you know that that is a part-time job. You are teaching part-time for White Hat Junior. But when you're freelancing, you can probably be teaching 10 students within your apartment. You can teach in a different coaching institution. You can be a guest lecturer at a separate college. I hope that clarified some things. These these terms are not typically interchangeable. Although, like I mentioned, customers are confused, the freelancers themselves are confused, which means they do often get used interchangeably. But before entering any agreement of sorts, just make sure that you know what you are entering into, because you don't want to take on something as a freelancer and then discover that it kind of ties you down. Moving on to enterprises. Now, being enterprising is part of being a freelancer, so then I wanted to discuss having an enterprise as being separate from being a freelancer. Now, I see a lot of freelancers, a lot of Indian and Pakistani freelancers on YouTube talk about freelancing, but then talk about how they outsource their freelancing projects to other people, and this typically is how an enterprise would function. You can be a freelancer who's gone into enterprising, but you don't necessarily become an enterprise owner because you are a freelancer. So I do believe that it is important to always clarify and be upfront with customers about whether you're outsourcing, whether you're functioning as an enterprise. But regardless of that, an enterprise is basically you networking and having employees maybe, or outsourcing your work and being a small business owner. So you can take on a lot more projects this way. You're functioning as a small agency of sorts. So if you are a photographer but you need somebody to edit those photos and you need somebody to edit those videos, you need somebody to make graphics, you might want to network with people who are able to deliver those resources. On the other hand, you are a photographer, you know a few more photographers and you pass on your gig to them, but you keep a percentage of the money being paid. You keep a larger percentage usually, which means that both of you get paid. So this is typically how an enterprise works with freelancing in India and in the Indian subcontinent. I'm not talking about the larger enterprises, of course, but this is an enterprise, and a freelancer very often aspires to become an enterprise owner and become an entrepreneur. But again, like I mentioned, I would believe that it is a little essential to be upfront about this to customers maybe, because you are still going to be liable for the projects you deliver. You will be held responsible by the customer for any projects that you have taken on, but regardless, that is a different issue. I just wanted to clarify the fact that as an enterprise, you are not typically doing the job yourself. You may be either outsourcing it or you're doing part of the job, not the entire project, and you have other people who you are responsible for. And sometimes you can become a full-time freelancer and take on a lot of projects and become an enterprise, single person enterprise as well. That is possible. You incorporate your business, and you can even do this while having a day job. So I have a friend who bakes. She has a wonderful Instagram page and she sells her cakes. Now, she also works a day job. This in no way hampers her association with the organization because there is a non-competition clause and there's no way baking correlates to her day job. So she has full freedom to function as an enterprise, and she has incorporated her company and she bakes and sells really pretty cakes. So that is something that that example I hope clarified something about an enterprise. Now, with regards to freelancers and fields like photography or design or writing, I've typically seen people talk about writing or data entry and outsource it and then keep a percentage of the fees paid by the customer. Again, but you are not being a freelancer then. You are being an enterprise, you're functioning as an enterprise, and I hope that kind of clarifies the concept that I'm trying to clear here, because as a freelancer, you take on a project, you deliver it within the time frame committed, you pocket all of the money, and that's it. It's not more complicated than that. But as an enterprise, you have maybe more than one person. And again, like I mentioned, a solo enterprise is just a solo enterprise, and many freelancers do intend to become an enterprise and corporate because there are tax benefits again associated with smaller businesses, so you might want to look into that. So as a solo enterprise, you're still a freelancer, but maybe you can have your own contract, you can have your own branding, you can have a much heavier portfolio, and you present as not just your name. Sometimes your enterprise can be named after you, but it is also a company with a sort of heavier weight to it than a freelancer. So even as a vendor, you register as a corporation by your customer and not as an individual vendor. So I hope that clarifies things, and until next week, I would love to see you very soon, and I appreciate the time you spent on this video. So thank you so much for watching, and take care.